Shifting focus to more news coming in, US President Donald Trump has stated that he is willing to impose more sanctions on Russia, but only if NATO partners stop buying Russian oil. He has stated that Europe is still purchasing Russian oil and that their sanctions are not tough enough. President Trump has repeatedly threatened to take tough measures against Moscow, but has also called on NATO allies to do their part. Earlier, he has stated that the purchase of Russian oil by some European countries has shocked him as it weakens the West's negotiating position and bargaining power over Russia. President Trump has argued that halting the purchase of Russian oil combined with tariffs would greatly help in ending the conflict. Meanwhile, when asked about a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, President Trump stated that a trilateral involving the United States would take place relatively soon. Listen in.
Well, they're not doing the job. NATO has to get together. Europe has to get together and do. Look, Europe they're my friends, but they're buying oil from Russia. So we can't be expected to be the only ones that are, full bore. But Europe is buying oil from Russia. I don't want them to buy oil. And the sanctions that they're putting on are not tough enough. And I'm willing to do sanctions, but they're going to have to toughen up their sanctions commensurate with what I'm doing. And I think I'm going to have to do all the talking. They hate each other.
When do you think that will take place?
I don't know, relatively soon.
Have any of the NATO
We're going to get it worked out one way or the other, but relatively soon.
Have any of the NATO
They hate each other so much, they can't breathe. So I'm going to have to get involved.
With us on the broadcast is Ms. Irina Zuckerman, senior journalist, joining us live from New York. Thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World today. At the outset, I'd like to ask you, do you think this prospective sanctions, if Europe does impose sanctions on Russia, will it really hit Russia's economy? And in light of these recent statements that Trump and Zelensky have been making, do you think a trilateral could catalyze?
Thank you so much for this question. Europe is actually already past its 19th round of sanctions, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, sanctions are much more efficient if they're done collectively and coordinated with the United States and perhaps also with other countries. Of course, their effect is limited by the fact that many of the countries of the global south are not taking part in those sanctions. Moreover, Europe has already agreed to stop purchasing Russian energy, such as gas, starting 2027. But because energy contracts are typically long-term, simply cutting off supply without first negotiating agreements with other countries, which again depend on the availability of supply, distribution schedule, and so forth, is going to take time. It's not something that can be done immediately. This is why President Trump's argument is not exactly made in good faith. He claims that the European sanctions are not as tough as American, but that is simply not true. U.S. continues to purchase metals from Europe. In fact, along with the European Union, it nearly doubled its exports in 2024 since the year previously imports from Russia. So U.S. has also not imposed or strictly enforced every sanction that it could. Of course, there's going to be a natural limitation to sanctions without negotiating with other countries outside the European Union. It's going to be hard to completely to use only sanctions to bring down Russian economy, but it could still be effective. But what Trump is doing now is making an excuse for not imposing any additional new sanctions on Russia until Europe does something that is impossible, meaning cut off the supply that's already been negotiated through 2027.
All right, ma'am, I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking some other key developments as far as the Russia-Ukraine war